I'm Greg Sanders, Group Publisher at QSR Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, the QSR Drive-Thru Report, reviewing the 2022 results. So technology and innovation inspired by COVID-19 have turned quick service's biggest category, the drive-thru, into something that's really hardly recognizable today. And in this webinar, we're going to take a look at how that's playing out for today's restaurant operators. We'll cover a few housekeeping notes before we get started. First, a recording of this session will be linked at qsrmagazine.com, and you can also use today's login link for on-demand viewing. Second, slides for today's program are available for download using the resources widget on the webinar console. Next, we will be answering audience questions at the end of the program. However, please feel free to submit a question at any time. And finally, a huge thanks to LG for sponsoring today's program. All right, now to begin, our speakers today are Laura Livers, Head of Strategic Growth at Intouch Insight, and Danny Klein, Editorial Director at QSR Magazine, and I'm going to turn it over to Laura to get started.
Thank you, Greg, and a sincere welcome to the audience. I know there's always interest in data around the drive-thru experience, and I know it's honestly one of my favorite topics, kind of working on the provider side for you guys. So again, my name is Laura Livers. I'm the Head of Strategic Growth at Intouch Insight. And by now, most of you likely have seen some of the key findings from the 2022 drive-thru study that was released last year. Today, in this webinar, we'll be looking at some of the lesser known data impacting order accuracy, friendliness, and satisfaction as influenced by speaker quality and personalization. My hope is that when you leave the session, you'll be able to identify some low-hanging fruit. These are easy wins that'll help you enhance the drive-thru experience. So let's dive in. So a little bit of the background and methodology for just a second. So for 22 years, the Annual Drive-thru study has covered the same core brands, delivering a long history of providing the leading insights into drive-thru performance. Now, on the methodology side, listed are the 10 brands included in the 2022 study and the number of shops completed by daypart. In total, Intouch Insight conducted over 1,500 mystery shops over the 10 brands. So when we approach the drive-thru study from the lens of the following key themes. So some of the highlights I'm getting ready to talk about are from the 2020 study last year. So order accuracy. Accurate orders were 49 seconds faster than inaccurate orders. 34% of inaccuracies were beverage related. Speed of service. The average total service time was 10 seconds faster than in 2021. Friendliness. When staff was reported as being friendly, orders were 15% more accurate and almost 4 times faster in the total speed of service. Service and satisfaction. Again, friendliness increases quality of service, speed of service, and it directly improves customer satisfaction. Suggestive selling. Transactions were 1 minute and 30 seconds faster with suggestive selling. So as we ramp up for the 2023 study, drive-thru study, I wanted to mention that your brand can participate in the study by becoming a challenger brand. So if you're a growing QSR with 150 locations, drive-thru locations, you want to better understand your competitive landscape, you want to design business strategies for growth, then this is for you. Benchmark your brand's drive-thru performance against 10 leading QSR chains to see how you measure up. So before we go further, let's address the Chick-fil-A phenomenon. If you look at the study last year, Chick-fil-A came out as the longest overall transaction time. However, the reality is that Chick-fil-A had the highest number of cars per line. Yes, they were slower because they were busier. They were the fastest brand at moving cars through the drive-thru. They received a 93% speed of service satisfaction score. And when this same question was asked, but calculated by the number of cars in line, Chick-fil-A was the clear leader. So the data is important, but the context holds the truth. So in the context of the overall drive-thru experience, how important are speaker clarity and personalization? So buckle up, what I'm about to tell you. So the QSR industry is experiencing accelerated change, no surprise here. Drive-thru continues to be the most popular category for the QSR, outperforming dine-in, delivery, and takeout. So in 2022, convenience and speed of service were the top two reasons why people visited a drive-thru. Based on an average meal cost of $9.02 and a difference of 49 seconds between accurate and inaccurate orders, annual losses due to the inaccurate orders add up, as you can see on this slide. So customers rank order accuracy as an important factor for a positive drive-thru experience. So while customers may be forgiving when it comes to wait times, one misstep in the order accuracy and business could be lost possibly to your competitor. So friendliness is steadily on the decline from a 79% in 2019 to 72% in 2022. Friendly orders were 3 minutes and 5 seconds faster than unfriendly orders. Despite consumers not ranking friendliness as significant as total service time and accuracy, we found that it had a positive impact on both, as I just referenced. So here, huge opportunity for the QSRs. According to Accenture, 83% of customers are willing to share personal information if it means getting personalized experiences. So if customers are willing to share their information, this could be an easy win for you. By tailoring each experience to the customer and making it memorable and seamless, you are increasing your brand loyalty. So now let's take a grasp. So now let's have a better grasp on impact. Let's look at the context. Let's talk about how some of these low-hanging fruit are ripe for the picking. Orders were 9% more accurate when the drive-thru speaker was clear and easy to understand. Speed of service was also 71 seconds faster when the speaker was clear and understandable. Here we see that friendliness was 32% higher when the speaker quality was clear and easy to understand. And customer satisfaction was 19% higher when the speaker was clear and easy to understand. So, are you checking the quality of your drive-thru speakers on a regular basis? So now let's take a minute, talk about personalizing the drive-thru experience and why it matters. Friendliness, once again, is 27.5% higher when customers experienced personalization during their visit. And 89% of the brands in this study offered some form of personalization, though not done consistently. Personalized interactions are perceived as more friendly by 93% of the customers. And remember, friendliness leads to faster service time and better order accuracy. Satisfaction is 10.5% higher when personalization is used, throughout the drive-thru experience. Loyalty is earned on the front lines. If something as simple as a personalized greeting could increase customer satisfaction, then why not do it? Order accuracy improved by 2.5% when personalization was given. And this is important because consumers rank order accuracy as the most important factor for a positive drive-thru experience. So here's another way to interpret today's insights. Go for the low-hanging fruit. This is where you can start to have an immediate impact. This can include, but are not limited to, removing obstacles for your employees, meaning fixing broken equipment, providing proper training, and make it easier for your employees to succeed. Friendliness will come more naturally if employees aren't under pressure or frustrated. Audit your operations regularly to make sure that the experience is as smooth and working and that employees are properly trained. Make personalization second nature. If you're collecting customer data, find ways to organically use it in the drive-thru experience. And as you saw, inaccuracies and unfriendliness will cost you. You can make small adjustments to enrich the customer experience and see the positive impact on your bottom line. And thank you. Appreciate your time today. Back to you, Greg.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And now let's hear from my colleague, Danny Klein at QSR Magazine. So, Danny, every year the question of does speed of service really matter in the drive-thru comes up in the report. Talk about what the findings showed us in that regard this year.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for having me, of course. But so it's always really interesting. Speed of service, at least as long as I've been working on the drive-thru study, we try to position it as though it's, maybe it's not the entire story. And then every time we release the report, it's always the first thing that people go to and want to learn about. And then consumers, even on their side, want to measure and kind of take stock of. And that's always the buzziest headline. So as much as we want to talk about the nuances of speed of service, it is still really much, or very much so, kind of where people go first. But I was actually at a franchisee conference in September, and we were going over some of this data. And they kept telling me 6 minutes. And I was saying, okay, well, 6 minutes to what exactly? Because in the drive-thru, one of the interesting things about speed is really all these different buckets about when do you start measuring it. So for us, we did a survey portion of the study too. And I think this was probably, to me, the most important thing that came out, which was the consumers in the survey said they'd be willing to spend 13 minutes when ordering through a drive-thru, which was pretty much on par with the year before and a little bit higher than the year before that. They typically wait about 10 minutes, think 8 is ideal. However, key back to the 6 minutes concept, as I told the brand, they were right on par because respondents considered it reasonable and fair to spend just under 6 minutes prior to ordering. And that to me is the key, because I think what you learn from that insight is that if somebody pulls up and they see 50 cars there and it takes them 10 minutes to get there, you have a really high likelihood of people turning off and leaving the drive-thru lane. But if you can get them to actually take their order within that 6 minute point, they're pretty willing after that to, either sit on their car or sit on their phone, and they're a little bit less, salty in terms of, if you made them sit there without even having their order taken. And of course you see, brands like Chick-fil-A and In-N-Out who, Starbucks is doing this now too, in terms of the order takers in line. So that sort of that perception of speed, which is something that Chick-fil-A talks a lot about. How fast does it feel? Is really important to when you actually get your order taken. So, to the study accuracy really, and all the people that we talk to, that has become almost the ticket to entry. Consumers are focusing on that. But again, at the end of the day, I think if it's going to take somebody a really long time, you have to be very cognizant of exactly how that car is moving. And if it's constantly moving, is it static? And all those things really play a role here.
So let's talk about the elephant in the lane, as it were. And Laura, talked about Chick-fil-A a bit, but Chick-fil-A is always fascinating when it comes to the drive-through study, and as you and I well know, can certainly stir up all kinds of attention. But from your perspective, what did their metrics tell us about the drive-through performance indicators?
Yeah, and this is always an anecdote I like to tell years ago, as you probably, of course, remember, is that Fox News picked up our drive-through study coverage and ran a giant headline that said Chick-fil-A is the slowest drive-through in America, according to QSR. And, of course, then everybody kind of, lost their minds. And, back to what Laura was saying, it was all about context, even though we provided it within the story. Fox did not, read that deep into it. But it's really the simple answer to that question is the fact that they are the busiest. So if you're going to have, you're going to do mystery shops, of course, if you pull up to a situation where you got 20 cars versus 2 cars, one is going to take longer than the other. So in some ways, the fact that they were quote unquote the slowest was really, a positive for them. But also, as Laura had pointed out, in terms of how fast they're moving cars through the line, they were actually first. So they went upside down in those 2 charts, which goes to show you 2 things. A, they're busy, and B, they have this very good system in terms of, again, to the perception of speed of how the consumer views them. One of my favorite stats actually in our study this past year was that, when we asked whether or not, what was the speed of service satisfaction for Chick-fil-A, and it was 93%. So, if they are indeed, once again, slow, according to, somebody, then consumers don't seem to actually agree with that sentiment, which I think tells you everything you need to know. And, Chick-fil-A's got this kind of checkpoint system that they do where, it reminds me a lot of ways of how like a server might do table checks, take your order, come back 5 minutes later, just so you don't feel like you haven't seen anybody for 45 minutes. And that experience is a lot different feeling than, say, somebody takes your order and again, they don't come back till they bring you your plate of food. You might be sitting there going, where's the server? Well, Chick-fil-A actually has found a way to do that in the drive-thru. So that starts with taking your order in line, and then you pull up, you talk to somebody else, they check your order at another line, and it ends up being a 3 or 4, step process. And actually, some tests, they'll actually put a number on the car, almost like they would at a, QSR table, so that they're able to keep track of where everybody is and then kind of funnel them into places that they think they need to be. But the key to all of that is that they touch you with consumers, hospitality throughout that process. And so it ends up, that satisfaction score. And then, of course, the friendliness part of that, too, to Laura's, part is they're obviously, as we all know, amazing at that. And it makes the entire circular experience feel a lot more satisfying.
So, Danny, let's switch gears and talk about technology a bit. So, from your perspective, are customers ready for technology in the drive-thru, and if so, then what kinds of technology?
Yeah, so this also was a really interesting part of the study because I think we're at a bit of an inflection in the industry where everyone is adding technology because, either they had no choice, and also because when the drive-thru became really the lifeline and it rose to the top of sort of the playbook for, people, it's just that you had to optimize it. So, one stat that I'll start with, and just kind of keeping to this theme that we've been on, is that 31% of consumers demonstrated a preference to placing orders with an employee in line. Again, those kind of tablets as you walk through. And so to me, when I see that, you might think that should be higher, but, I do think it speaks to the brand and probably what some guests are used to, and the fact that some have this system down and some don't. So, the speaker pay window as a quicker option is probably going to be true for a lot of brands. And that's still the case. So, I think the fact that Chick-fil-A does that correctly doesn't mean that everybody should. And in other words, if you don't have these giant lines, you're probably still kind of, Pal's is a restaurant that I wrote about recently, and one thing that they've done and have done forever is that they don't have speaker boxes, that you talk directly to the employee at the window, and that's something that they're never going to change. So again, I think it goes to who your brand is and what kind of technology fits. again, order accuracy being 15% higher when the service is rated as friendly, that almost might be where you want to kind of start your technology conversation, and QR codes, express lanes, these type of things I think are all very interesting, but they kind of dovetail into some of the more buzzy things like artificial intelligence. Actually in our study, more than 2/5 of the people that we surveyed said they dislike hearing an automated voice when ordering. So again, there have been brands, Checkers being one, who have had a ton of success with that. Del Taco's running it out now. But again, I think you just have to pay attention to who your guest is and where technology fits. But without question, that's what's going to power it. As Laura was saying, things like your speaker boxes, all the, digital menu boards and confirmation, all of these things are coming to the industry and they're making the guest experience better. So as long as it runs through that lens, I think technology is making the drive-through industry a much better place.
Well, so can you speak to like any specific types of impacts that technology is having in the drive-through at this point?
Yeah, so order confirmation boards, I think, are the good one to kind of start with. Brands like RBI, Burger King, parent company, they're in the process right now of really bringing digital menu boards across the system, because I think most people that you ask, are going to want to be able to see their order. They're not really going to have a problem with that concept of I tell it to you and then it pops out in front of me. So, in this survey or in the study, in the report, menu board placed ahead of the ordering speaker, so there was time to review prior to order, was really high at 78% of what people were looking for. 73% said order confirmation screens were somewhat or most important to their drive-through visit. So those are both really high numbers, and they were both up from 60 and 74% respectively in 2020. So again, that kind of goes to show you, through that COVID window, when drive-through usage really spiked, expectations also have gone up. So that concept of just being convenient in the drive-through for consumers at this point is not really the ticket that it once was. The trade-off isn't always there because the competitive set is so wide. So you really have to get these things correct in order to be competitive and to get people to come back. So, order confirmation boards accounted for a 2% increase in order accuracy, but when paired with a verbal confirmation by the employee that the OCB is correct, the study showed an increase of 7.5% in order accuracy. So again, that really encompasses this fact that, your customer service, your training, and technology can live together in a way to make everything better. One by one, it's a little bit hard, but together, I think that there's a way for everybody to move forward.
Okay, Danny, one final kind of catch-all question for you. Just share with us, if you will, any other lasting impressions from the 2022 report that you think are noteworthy.
Yeah, I thought this year's report was really interesting to kind of watch how the consumer now has put accuracy as really their lead thing they're going after. 51% of respondents said they were overwhelmed by large menus, which I thought was a really interesting concept, because I think, a lot of brands who have gone sort of to these drive-through only designs, usually it comes with a pared down menu, and it's a question of whether or not that's worth doing. And in my opinion, it is, because I think the streamlined, accurate approach of sort of your best hits at the drive-through, I think people, the one thing that they don't want to do is pull away at this point. Mobile phones have really changed, I think, the consumer mindset of how accuracy is delivered in their ordering experience, whether that's even retail and Amazon, or if it's actually food service. They're just used to getting things not only accurate, but to having it shown in front of their face, and then they see the confirmation, you check the email to make sure that's what you in fact ordered, things like that. And I think that's what's happening with food in the drive-through now. So if I, pretty much every operator I talk to, from Wendy's to CKE, order accuracy was the one thing that really threaded through the study this year versus even the prior year, was that just this fact that we have to get it right, because guests are much less forgiving of that part of our business now, especially if they're paying more money, as we all know now. But that is my lasting impression. I think accuracy is maybe the new number one metric But at the end of the day, drive-through is always going to be a complex, system in terms of all the different moving parts of it.
All right, Danny, thank you so much for that insight. We are going to turn to our audience questions now. And Laura, I've actually got several for you, but the first is, when will the 2023 drive-through study results be released?
So the results will be announced at the upcoming QSR conference in September, and the report will be published by Intouch Insight in early October.
Great. And just as some shameless self-promotion to follow up there, QSR is launching its inaugural QSR Evolution Conference in September in Atlanta. Hopefully all of our audience have heard about it. If you haven't yet, you will be hearing a lot more soon. So yeah, we're looking forward to that, Laura. So Laura, there are also just a few questions about some of the details of how the study was conducted, and these come up quite a bit. So maybe you could address them very quickly. So first is about measuring speed. Can you just talk a little bit of how the speed is measured? At what points are you taking those measurements to determine the service?
Yeah, I see several questions on that. So when we are referencing speed of service, that is the total time from once the shopper reaches the menu order board. So that we will take 3 times from once they reach the menu board until they actually place the order, drive up, and then once you place your order to pay, and then once you pay, how long to receive your order. So we combine all 3 of those timings into one total service time.
Okay, great. Let's see. Yeah, there are quite a few questions that have come in about the study. This is also an interesting one to me. So in terms of the study, how are you characterizing a quote unquote poor speaker? Is it noisy? I mean, is it a subjective measurement? How is that done?
So it can be a little bit subjective, but typically what we are finding, it's the communication between the shopper and the employee. It's muddled. It's not clear. And yes, it can be noisy, crackly, but it's hard to understand.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see, Danny, I'm going to throw this one out to you. See if you have any insight from the operators you talked with. But what are we seeing in terms of growth and upsell success in the drive-through? Or I would invite you to comment on that as well if you have any insight there.
Well, yeah, I think I'm trying. I mean, it's a pretty varied question. Actually, one of the things about artificial intelligence and the brands doing that is they claim this is working really well in that case. But at the same time, I think I'll talk back about PALs. They actually don't upsell in the drive-through at all, which I actually thought was a really interesting concept. Their idea is sort of this is what you're going to order a la carte. That's how their menu operates. But I do think, brands usually typically upselling comes down to the training of the employee at the window. Starbucks has made a pretty big initiative to make sure that modifier side of their business is pretty clear. But the other part of that too is that so many drive-thrus now are connected with the order ahead ability with mobile, and that upsell ability really actually now starts for a lot of operators in their tech stack before it even, comes to the actual employees saying, hey, do you, want ice cream or whatever it might be. So I think upselling is becoming something that, you can go about from a lot of different angles. And it really does seem to be very effective in terms of check building from people who order ahead digitally.
Yeah. So I'll tag on a little bit. So in the study, 42% of the orders had a suggestive selling or upselling. But really, again, what I have found in working with clients, and actually as we're building the questionnaire, developing it, that topic comes up. And I've actually seen some clients really not interested in that information, more than I've seen in the past of doing this for 30 plus years. So the percentage is, I think it's actually dropping again over the years. But again, what I can tell you is it does, when we do measure it, it does increase the ticket size revenue. And what we have found is when suggestive selling occurs, orders are more accurate and it actually is faster.
So we've had a few questions come in about AI, artificial intelligence, and I believe it was Danny who made some comments about AI and consumer preferences. But Laura, were there any, in the course of conducting this study, are you aware of any brands that were using AI in the drive-thru?
I am not aware. Now I know I'm going to go ahead and say this, as we are embarking on the 2023 study and in the early stages of developing that, one of the things that we are doing at Intouch is we also are looking at evolving the study. So we've got a survey that's going to go out to the users and the audience about what would you like to see. And so AI, I do think, is an important question component. So perhaps we'll see something in the upcoming 2023 study.
Yeah, and let me make a comment about that really quickly, Greg, if that's cool.
Sure.
So I wrote this in my story back in October, but I don't have it in front of me stat-wise. But I actually went back and kind of looked to see with order confirmation boards how they compared to that question on AI, and it was actually pretty similar if you went back a few years. So I think with AI, as I mentioned earlier, the preference wasn't super high for the consumers surveyed, but I think that that's as much a reaction to the fact that it's not widespread, and a lot of the people who were asked that question just haven't experienced it as much as the fact that they've experienced it and not liked it. So I think that question is not really able to be answered in the way that we approached it at this time. You probably have to say, let's come back 2-3 years from now when the adoption is a lot higher, to see whether or not people, actually feel as though it's a worse experience. So I think right now it's just very early stages. I think that the brands who are doing it, who have had success with it, it's a great case study. Now let's kind of see, what happens next and whether that, goes beyond sort of the novelty part of trying it to, I actually do prefer this. So I just think we're at an inflection of not knowing yet whether or not it works to that level. But it definitely is really exciting. And I think that those who I have talked to who are implementing it are very happy with it.
So Laura, just since you did mention the 2023 study, I did want to find and the possibility of helping perhaps our audience helping to shape some of the things that are studied like AI. When is the fielding for the 2023 study taking place this year?
So we're already taking orders, but the fielding starts mid-May. Will end of June. So that's year over year. The studies are fielded in the late spring, summertime.
Okay, great. Danny, we had a couple of questions come in about menus. Are you seeing operators doing special quote unquote menus for the drive-thru, maybe with more limited items, or is the menu offering and mix part of the strategy for drive-thru success?
I am seeing brands do the drive-thru menus specific to the drive-thru and seeing a lot of success with it. And I think a lot of that comes from probably labor challenges and just the supply and the efficiency that they're trying to make sure that they deliver on the accuracy and the speed part of it. Caribou Coffee, just talked to them a few weeks ago about this. They have this cabin model, which has no dining room. And one thing that they did is that menu on that location is not the same, yet the AUVs on those stores are similar, if not higher in some spots. So the fact that they actually pared that menu down has not hurt them. So another coffee brand I talked to was doing it too. So I think that that's becoming very common. Again, it kind of depends, because you have to think about the presentation of it, what your signage looks like. And again, how many items are on your menu to begin with. So if you have a giant, menu and you're trying to find a way to make it so somebody pulling up can see it, that's probably going to influence how you want to go about approaching that. But But yeah, there are definitely a lot of brands, I would say more than not, who are changing that menu for the drive-through versus if you walk in the door.
So here's an interesting question. I'm going to start this one with Laura. I expect a definitive answer for both of you. How long is too long in the drive-through?
I'm going to go back to what Danny was talking about. That, I mean, what we see is, and beyond the study, I mean, just research out there in general, is it's about keeping the consumer engaged. And again, I will highlight and compliment Chick-fil-A. They've taken that inside approach of personalization and having contact and movement. They've taken that approach and they've moved it outside. So you may take a much longer time, but if the consumer is engaged, you see topics of entertainment. You see more of the digital menu boards and the digitizing of anything. And that's to keep the consumer engaged. You do see more chains with putting their employees outside. Consumers they don't perceive that as a long time, even though your watch may dictate otherwise. But keeping the consumer engaged throughout the process is a possibility in helping that time. But as we all know, we've got customers that are expecting immediacy. Some are very, very understanding. And I am just going to bring up friendliness honestly has a lot to do with this. If you've got the warm, friendly greeting, whether it's outside by an employee or at the window, at the speaker board, and then you drive up and the friendliness is there, this whole timing and how long it took, it just, in all honesty, it can melt away. Friendliness is a big factor in this as well.
Yeah, so I think building on that, one of the most underrated things Chick-fil-A started doing was actually having you pull up and then have someone come bring the food to the window. That wasn't just done for the sake of the fact that they were trying to push you ahead of another car. One of the reasons they did that was so that person could actually walk up to the window and say something nice to you, which maybe eases whatever issue you might have had before. But in terms of actually a logistical number there, and the number that we had was 13 minutes. So apparently, once it went over 13 minutes, it fell off a cliff in terms of people saying yes or no. So beyond 13 minutes total, and again, that seems like a pretty high number, going back to that 6 minutes to order, which I think is more what you want to circle. But I guess that entire experience, once it got beyond 13, people were very much not okay with that, I guess. So, but again, they said 8 minutes was their ideal, and 10 was kind of more what they were used to. So kind of interesting, seems pretty high. But again, I think 6 minutes to order is where you really want to make sure you deliver.
So I think we kind of alluded to this, but Danny, do you have any intel on how ordering ahead is affecting speed at the drive-thru?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. Brands, a lot of brands, Chipotle being maybe kind of the banner example of this, are now, that's the only thing you can do. There's no other way to order at their pickup lane, and now you see this wave of pickup lanes from Sweetgreen, the Noodles and Company. A lot of brands who are attacking those they're all order ahead. And then the other kind of side to that are the brands who are adding the extra lane, and that lane is either can flex, like in KFC's case, to open capacity if it's busy, or they could just make it for, order ahead. So I think it's helping restaurants. It's causing a little bit of, you got to figure out how best to make it work, to make it not a friction, filled experience. But at the same time, if you're talking about accuracy, it should help you be more accurate, right? And I do think it raises the stakes there, for the consumer who is doing that. But I think it's overall, from a speed perspective, the numbers on some of those pickup lanes that at least they share, can be kind of crazy. I remember originally back in the early days of the Chipotle lane, it was kind of something crazy like 13 seconds, which I'm sure is not the case anymore. But at the same time, just went to show you that they can move really quickly with order ahead if they have the handoff, set up in a way that all of that operates pretty well. But what you're seeing now too is that a lot of these brands are making sure they put make lines and stations next to the window, even if it's like a walk-up window like Wendy's is doing, just to make sure that you have that, kind of streamlined approach where, people are able to, deliver really quickly with that bag out the window.
All right, we have time for one, maybe two more questions. Laura, I've got a very specific study question to give to you. So we have an attendee who wants to know, if I participate in the study, are the menu items pre-selected, or can I tell you which areas I want to see measured?
So we highly recommend, we work with the clients, and we recommend one hot entree sandwich, one side item, and one drink. And this honestly is done to ensure consistency in the methodology, and especially in regards to timing.
All right, very good. So we'll do one more question. This one's for Danny. We've had a couple of inquiries about dual drive-through lanes, and I guess I'll pose it to you like this: are dual drive-through lanes a trend, or just kind of a specialty thing that works in certain locations?
I would say it's probably the second thing, because just from a space perspective, and also, you have to make sure that even something about how those lanes converge, right? If, it's just not going to be for everybody, and also we have to kind of see how things develop. Are people going to continue to move toward, ordering ahead? Probably. Do you need both lanes? Are you the type of concept that is going to be able to handle that type of volume, or do you want to even maybe kind of change the way cars approach the window? So I think mostly it's going to be the type of thing that for some chains they're going to go really heavy on. I think Shake Shack's got 3 lanes, and of course Taco Bell's bank looking Defy restaurant's got 4 lanes. So I think it's going to make a lot of sense in a lot of places, but at the same time, there will always be, even that exact Taco Bell Defy location, the second version of it is actually going to have 1 fewer lane and a dining room for people to come eat lunch. So they were able to kind of take learnings from that first one and realize that people do still want to come inside. So I think that they will become widespread in certain places for the brands who use them and use them effectively. But overall, as an entire industry trend, I don't know that everyone's going to have one in 5 years, if that makes sense. But at the same time, who knows? If you had asked me if anyone would have opened a 4-lane, bank-style elevated drive-through before COVID, I would have said no. So this industry is very dynamic, which is a good part about it. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all our time today. We had a lot of questions. I apologize that we couldn't get through them all, but we will do our best to follow up offline and answer some more of those. But that is going to conclude our program. I want to say a big thanks again to LG for making the program possible, to our audience for attending, and of course to Laura and Danny for sharing their insight. As I mentioned at the top of the program, a recording of the program will be linked on QSRmagazine.com, or you can use today's login link to view it anytime. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.